There is a sentence hidden in the soil of the Eden garden that changes how we read the whole story. The gifts remained, but the ease of using these gifts was lost. When many people read Genesis 3, they imagine God introducing entirely new realities into creation. Work begins, childbirth begins, struggle begins after the fall. But the whole of the Hebrew text whispers something different. Adam was already working, Eve was already destined for motherhood, and humanity was already called to rule and multiply. The curse did not create vocation, the curse wounded vocation. The first blessing was before sin entered the world, before a thorn pierced the ground, before tears ever touched human face, God spoke his first command to humanity: be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Now, the Hebrew says, Peru erevu, and this means bear fruit and become many. This was not merely biology, this was participation. Humanity was invited to join God in extending Eden into the world. The garden was not the final destination, it was the first sanctuary. Adam and Eve were priests of this creation, called to spread sacred space outward until the whole earth reflected heaven. Children were always a part of that calling. You see, life was always intended. Generations were always intended. Love was always intended. The multiplication of sorrow came when in Genesis 3 verses 16, the Hebrew word that is used, I will create pain. It says, harba arbe, multiplying. I will multiply the pain. That was after the fall. The grammar itself is like thunder. This construction intensifies something already present. The same pattern appears when God promises Abraham's descendants. You see, I will greatly multiply your seed, he says to Abram. The descendants did not come into existence because of the phrase, their abundance increased because of it. You see, the same thing happens when God said, I will greatly multiply your sorrow and your conception to Adam and Eve. Itzavon is the word used. The word is larger than labor pains. It means sorrow, grief, toil, weariness, emotional anguish, burdens carried in the soil. The same word appears only once in a verse later. To Adam, God says, in toil you shall eat of it. The same Hebrew word, the woman experienced itzavon in bringing life. The man experienced itzavon in sustaining life. The womb struggles to bear forth bread of life. The earth struggles to bring forth bread for eating. The body both becomes places of resistance to the humanity. The curse strikes not identity but calling. The mirror between Adam and Eve. Notice this symmetry. Eve's fear was multiplication. Adam's fear was cultivation. Neither disappeared. Both just became very difficult after the fall. The womb now bleeds, and the ground now bleeds. The earth that was once opened freely to seed now produces thorns. The body that once would have carried life in joy now carries it through travail. Creation itself groans. Centuries later, Paul writes in Romans that creation still groans and waits for redemption. The cry that began in Eden still echoes through hospitals, graveyards, fields, and nations. Nakedness meets craftiness. Then comes one of the most brilliant pieces of Hebrew wordplay in Scripture, in Genesis 2, where it then says, they were both naked and were not ashamed. The Hebrew word is aromim. Now, this means naked. Then, immediately after that, now the serpent was once more crafty than any beast of the field. The word crafty here is arum. It comes from the word aromim. Crafty, the same word used for nakedness. The word sounds almost identical. But the humans are arumim, open, transparent, nothing hidden. The serpent is arum, which means hidden, subtle, twisting, concealing motives behind words in their naked state. Innocence meets manipulation. Transparency meets strategy. Trust meets suspicion. The serpent does not arrive with claws, he arrives with a question. The first wound, that was the question. That was the wound. Has God indeed says, he said to Eve. Did God say? The first human wound entered through crafting the innocence of their naked state. Before hands reached for fruit, ears received a distortion. The serpent offered an ancient philosophy, suggesting to manage life and creation for themselves, living forever, a crafty control over what belonged to God. Life and creation belonged to God. Perhaps God cannot be trusted is the meaning. Perhaps boundaries are prisons. Perhaps dependence is weakness, and perhaps obedience is limitations. Perhaps autonomy is freedom, and the temptation is not fruit. The temptation is self-definition, knowing God and evil. The Hebrew says the word yodei tovara, knowing the good and evil. This phrase appears elsewhere in scripture regarding the kings and the judges. It often means to determine, to decide, to rule, to pronounce judgment. The serpent offers independence to judge over their own creation and life. You can become your own authority. That is what it means. You can decide what is truth. You can define reality. Humanity reaches for the throne. Exactly what Satan did. Not because they lacked the image of God, not because they wanted God's position. The great irony here is that the serpent promises your eyes will be open. And yes, they were, but not upwards, downwards. They saw the nakedness, fear, distance, and shame that came with the fall. The first thing they do with their new enlightenment is to hide. The first emotion is fear, and the first act is autonomous. The first thing that humanity do is to conceal themselves. The first religion is ensuing fig trees like the ancient practices of fertility does. The first question God asks after the fall is, where are you? And Adam seems lost, but he's not. He lost himself. The lie beneath every lie is the center in Eden that stands poisonous. The idea that God is withholding good from you. That every sin ever committed grows from that seed. If God cannot be trusted, then disobedience becomes reasonable. If God is withholding, then grasping becomes survival. If God is not generous, then rebellion becomes wisdom. Yet the tragedy is that they reached for what they already possessed, the image of God. Though they did not have the authority God had, they had His image, and they were in a relationship with Him, which they lost. The inheritance is already written in grace, and they lost that grace. Even the judgment that mercy spoke afterwards. The first gospel, the seed of the woman would crush the serpent's head. God rectifies all these things. You see, redemption comes through a tree. The ground produces thorns. The Messiah wears the thorns. The woman suffers in bringing forth life. Mary suffers in bringing forth the life of the world. Adam hides amongst the trees. Christ hangs upon it. And so Adam reaches for what is not his, but the last Adam gives away what is rightfully his. The first Adam blames his bride, but the last Adam dies for his bride. So, if we wonder who's the children that Cain went to in the nations, that was already produced by Eden's children.